But first, it is being described as a political earthquake. Argentina elected far-right Javier Milei president on Sunday in a second-round runoff. The Libertarian has pledged drastic and dramatic immediate reforms to tame triple-digit inflation and end what he calls Argentina's decline. Joel Richards has this report from Buenos Aires.
A stunning victory in Argentina's presidential election for far-right Libertarian Javier Milei. With an 11-point advantage over Economy Minister Sergio Massa, the 53-year-old president-elect received a strong mandate for drastic changes he has promised the country.
This is not a task for the weak. It is not for cowards, and in particular, it is not for the corrupt. This is a task for those of us who want to put Argentina on its feet.
Milei supporters celebrated what they say is the death of Argentina's political class. This woman says they want to change, that they are fed up with corruption. She says she has faith in Milei. This couple told CGTN they voted for the Libertarian because of their concerns about the state of the economy as well as crime. Milei found strong support among the younger generation of Argentines, many of whom have not experienced the country's previous economic crises firsthand.
This is a historic moment. We need a profound change in Argentina because we were drowning under the pressure of so many taxes. This is a wonderful moment for Argentina.
Milei's opponent, Sergio Massa, conceded defeat before official results were released. During his campaign, Milei received endorsement from former US President Donald Trump, who said, quote, "Make Argentina great again." China's foreign ministry spokesperson congratulated Milei on his victory and said China is ready to work with Argentina. Now the transition begins. On Monday, Milei meets with the outgoing President Alberto Fernandez. Milei is set to take power with the country mired in its worst economic crisis in decades. Annual inflation is running at over 140%, and the president-elect has already announced major policy decisions. In a radio interview on Monday morning, Milei announced he will privatize state media outlets, as well as YPF, Argentina's state-owned energy company. Milei will take office on December the 10th. Joel Richards for CGTN in Buenos Aires.
Anytime something is called a political earthquake, it bears following up on. And for that, we're joined by Benjamin Norton. He is the founder and editor-in-chief of Geopolitical Economy Report. Benjamin, thanks very much for coming in and chatting with us. We certainly appreciate it. Now, we heard
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
We heard it detailed. Argentina is a mess. People want a better way of life. What are they going to get with Milei? His legions of fans call him the madman or the Whig. But was a vote for Milei, in many ways, a vote against the status quo?
Absolutely. It was mostly a protest vote. It was not necessarily a vote in support of Milei. And in fact, in terms of his platform, he has been very inconsistent. So when Milei was running before the first round of the election, because Argentina has 2 rounds, if one candidate doesn't win in the first, before his first round, he was running on a very extreme far-right platform in which he basically pledged to abolish every single government ministry. Now, a lot of people know that he has pledged to abolish the central bank and to dollarize the economy, but he has also pledged to abolish the ministries of education, healthcare, transportation. He pledged to abolish Social Security. I mean, really just an extreme platform. Now, in the second round, it is true that he slightly moderated his message. And in fact, in the last message that he published, he claimed that he's not going to cut security, privatize Social Security, that he's not going to, abolish the Ministry of Education and Health. Although this is something that he said for many years that he wanted to do. He is a follower of the anarcho-capitalist Murray Rothbard. So he's been very inconsistent and very chaotic. He's also known popularly as El Loco, the madman. And when you listen to some of his speeches, he's known for making very bizarre comments. There was a video that went viral of him claiming that he hears people speak in his head. He also claimed that he talks with a medium in order to speak with his dead dog, Conan, and that his dead dog advises him on economic policy. So a very strange man.
Indeed.
But what I do think we'll immediately expect is severe devaluation. And this is not the first time that Argentina has essentially dollarized the economy. There have been multiple previous governments that pegged the peso to the dollar. And essentially, by adopting the dollar, it's the most extreme form of peg possible. And in each case, we saw similar results. There was a period of temporary stability with low inflation, but it also led to severe unemployment and economic crisis. And then eventually, the country can no longer maintain the peg because it doesn't have the foreign exchange it needs, and there's an explosion.
Well,
so I think we can expect, learning from Argentina's past, it could be a temporary period of stability followed by a severe explosion.
Yeah, so people who want to change, I guess the message is strap in, it's coming. Well, here we have a political novice in charge with turning around the country. It's true, he is an economist, which I think never gets brought out, but his grand plans to slash spending, he campaigned with a chainsaw. How long will his supporters be patient? Because you detailed the concerns that Argentinians have run into in the past.
Well, again, I think a lot of, there are his diehard supporters who do believe in his kind of anarcho-capitalist extreme vision, but most of the people who voted for him, I think, were voting as a protest, just as in the United States, many people who voted for Donald Trump were simply voting as a protest, or similarly for Brexit in the UK. I think these are all similar phenomena. In the case of Argentina, I think pretty soon his approval ratings are going to drop because people are going to see that his policies are maybe going to stabilize the inflation. That's a possibility, absolutely, but they're going to cause severe macroeconomic damage. They're going to cause a severe devaluation and a crisis. Because we've seen other countries in Latin America have dollarized in this way, and the transition is always very difficult for average working people. So, for instance, Ecuador went through a very similar process of adopting the US dollar, but it only did so after the famous Feria Bancaria, in which the entire country was basically bankrupt, and everyone who held their savings in the local currency, they all lost their life savings.
Wow.
Everyone went bankrupt. And I think it's expected now, after his victory, Milei floated the idea of having a dual exchange system where we'll have both the dollar and the Argentine peso. But what's already happening is we're seeing further and further depreciation of the peso. And basically, everyone who has pesos is going to try to get out of them as soon as possible. But the reality is that still the vast majority of Argentine workers are paid in pesos, and they can only exchange so much. I mean, he is going to lift capital controls, but the reality is that if you don't have a lot of money, if you don't have a foreign bank account, it's hard to exchange all of those for dollars. So what we're going to see is really a further increase in drastic inequality.
Benjamin, you detailed a bit about Ecuador, but I'm curious, what do Argentina's Latin American neighbors think about this, and how do you think it's going to affect international measures, a time when China has made significant inroads in the region with its Belt and Road measures?
Well, Milei has claimed that he's going to break off both diplomatic and commercial relations with China and Brazil, which, even some of his supporters said this is a crazy idea, considering that the top two largest trading partners of Argentina are both Brazil and China, respectively.
Wow.
And again, in his comments, he was inconsistent because he's known as the madman. He sometimes said that he was going to only cut diplomatic relations with those countries, but then he also would sometimes say, like in an interview with the far-right U.S. news host Tucker Carlson, he claimed he wanted no commercial relations with those countries. And Argentina's trade with Brazil and China represents 35% of its total trade. So that would be economic suicide.
Absolutely.
Furthermore, he has also claimed that in addition to cutting ties with China, that he will not allow Argentina to join the BRICS bloc. Now, in the August summit of the BRICS of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, the summit was held in Johannesburg this August. Argentina was one of 6 countries that was invited to join BRICS, and the current government of President Alberto Fernandez, he said that he would accept that invitation. But that doesn't happen until the 1st of January, and Milei will come in before then, so it's very likely that he will put a pause on that and not join BRICS. And instead, Milei has said, he's been asked about his foreign policy, and he always says this. He says, our geopolitical alignment is with the United States and Israel, and he said, we are part of the West. So he's taken this very aggressive anti-China and anti-Russia policy. He also supports Ukraine, and basically he's allied with the Republican Party in the United States.
Wow. He's now going to guide Latin America's 3rd largest economy, and it's worth pointing out again that this Libertarian candidate won by a whopping margin and has broad support among the nation's young. Argentina's resources, grain and gas, I guess, are going to play a big part if the country is going to do something in an effort to right the ship?
Well, yes and no. The problem is that previous governments in Argentina, namely of the neoliberal persuasion, some of them did try to peg the currency to the dollar. But what actually happened is that, again, it provided some stability because the inflation crisis in Argentina is not new. I mean, there have been severe inflation crises many times in the 1970s and the 1980s. In fact, in 1989, inflation hit 3,000%, which makes today's inflation look like child's play, right? So in previous responses, governments tried to peg the currency to the dollar. But as I mentioned, one, that led to a problem because eventually they run out of the foreign exchange they need to maintain the peg, and then they have a severe devaluation crisis that follows, like 3,000% inflation. But furthermore, the other problem is that it significantly overvalues the value of the Argentine currency, which becomes the dollar, which means that it's very, of course, cheap to import, and you see a massive glut of imports and more imports of products, and yet that hurts the export sector. The problem is that for 100 years, Argentina's economy has been based entirely on exports, on the export of raw materials and agricultural products. So by trying to tame the inflation, which is of course something that's necessary, it actually is going to do severe damage to the Argentine economy. And if we look at the data from other countries in South America, and if we look at Ecuador specifically, of all of the countries in South America, Ecuador has been really in stagnation compared to, for instance, Argentina's neighbor, Brazil, which has had a very fast-growing economy. You know, the collapse of commodities in 2014 did severe damage to all of the countries in the region, but Brazil has recovered in a way that Ecuador hasn't. So even a lot of mainstream economists, even people from the International Monetary Fund, have been warning Milei not to dollarize because he thinks it's a silver bullet. And a lot of his supporters, they think the solution is just as simple as simply dollarizing and all the problems will go away. Yes, maybe inflation will go away, but it will create another series of cascading problems like inequality, unemployment, and overvalued currency, which leads to collapse of exports.